Devonta Smith, Eagles wide receiver, signed a 3-year, $75 million contract extension that includes $51 million guaranteed. Now, this contract is a little funny because it's, $25 million per year, but some of that is including his 5th-year option, which they just tacked this deal onto the end of that. But I think some people, Jordan, were a little surprised to see Devonta Smith get this deal for this number and for really at this timing, which we can talk about here in a second. But what was your reaction when you saw Devonta Smith sign this new contract?
So for starters, he's worth every penny. Devonta Smith, to me, is one of the top tier route runners in the league, one of the top tier separators in the NFL. It's just the offense in Philly doesn't necessarily feature him. It's the quarterback play doesn't exactly match up with it, but Howie Roseman is getting ahead of the contracts. We're still going to see Justin Jefferson get paid, Jamar Chase, and ironically, CD Lamb for the Dallas Cowboys. It kind of puts the pressure on Dallas of like, hey, you got to pay your guy now. You haven't really made any moves this offseason. And Howie Roseman's like, oh, I'm going to get ahead of a player that wasn't in his draft class, that got drafted later, and pay him before you pay your top tier receiver. So it's Howie Roseman making chess moves while other people are playing checkers.
Yeah, I love that the Eagles always hand their homework in early, where teams like the Cowboys wait to the last minute. They're cramming for the test at the final minute when it comes to contract extensions. I do agree with you that it's smart to get this done now. That was my first reaction because this was not on my radar because we have so many receivers up for deals. The Brandon Ayuk saga rolls on. Does he follow the 49ers on Instagram, or where are we at with the social media following stuff? We know Justin Jefferson is up for a contract extension, and then CeeDee Lamb and his agent, everybody basically says they're just like, yeah, we'll wait to see what Justin Jefferson signs before we put pen to paper on a new deal, which I think makes sense. So Devonta Smith kind of comes out of nowhere, but yeah, whatever you think about Devonta Smith's contract right now, you think he's overpaid at $25 million a year, which I'm with you, Jordan. I don't think he's overpaid at $25 million a year. Michael Pittman signed it for 23. Calvin Ridley signed it for 23. Devonta Smith is better than both of those players. And I like Michael Pittman and Calvin Ridley, but Devonta Smith is just a tier above those guys in my personal opinion. You think he's overpaid at that number? Wait till you see what those guys sign for, okay? And they're going to get way more than that. They're going to get real $30 million per year numbers. That is going to happen, and it's just that's the receiver market, man. So I'm curious. We agree this contract is worth it. I think we both agree. Well, I'll ask you this because I'll put it to you this way. I think when you look at the number 2 receivers in the NFL. Quote, number 2 receivers. If you want to call them 1B receivers, whatever, that's fine. I've been moving away from the 1B term because, Jordan, the second letter in the alphabet is B. So you're essentially saying number 2, even if we think you could be a number 1 on another team. And which my point in that is, I think when you look at all those guys, the T. Higgins, the Jalen Waddles, in my opinion, Deebo Samuel to Brandon Ayuk at San Francisco, the guy that I actually think could be the best one on another team is Devonta Smith. But from a fantasy perspective, Jordan, I do think is very sensitive to the kind of volatility that archetype brings. And I'm obsessed with talking about this because I think the most disappointing group in fantasy last year was this bucket of players that we're talking about right now. Deebo Samuel notwithstanding, because again, that's kind of a different offense, different situation, but Jalen Waddle didn't hit ADP expectations. Devonta Smith did not. T. Higgins injuries, but even when he and Burrow were on the field together, there was some volatility there. So am I wrong in feeling that this guy has the best talent to be, he's the best player of this kind of archetype, but he also might be, because of the offense he plays in, the most susceptible to fantasy volatility?
Oh yeah, definitely. He's, to me, if you flip Garrett Wilson and him, where Garrett Wilson's been going with Aaron Rodgers now in the top 12, or even flip him a Chris Olave, where again, 2 guys that get drafted ahead of him. He's just as talented, if not better, than both of those players. And they're all kind of in the same group of not necessarily built like the old school alphas, but play just exceptional football because they're just great separators. It just comes down to Philly with Saquon and Jalen Hurts. So you're not getting any real red zone usage out of him. And then even when you're throwing in the red zone, AJ Brown. AJ Brown is just a guy that's going to dominate the ball. And we saw that stretch of games where he went 6 straight games with over 125 yards this past season. There's some real reasons why he's not performing on a fantasy level. Well, if he flipped teams, he could have that Stephon Diggs outbreak where you see him go from a situation where he's kind of 1A, 1B to being the alpha and then getting 150 targets a year. It's just going to be, is it going to happen now that he's paid? It's probably not coming anytime soon.
Yeah, it really has nothing to do with him as a player, because I'm with you. Like, he is pretty, I'm not going to say flawless, but he just is so good as a route runner and a separator that, and like rather sneakily, a lot of the times in this particular, I can't wait to see what they do with these receivers this year, because like they signed Devontae Parker. I can't imagine that Parker is going to really be a big needle mover for them, but he is a pure X receiver. At times they've had Devonta Smith be the guy to line up as their X, and then AJ Brown's been that movable chess piece for them where they could put him off the ball, they could put him in the slot. I mean, if Parker is their third receiver, he again has to line up at X. Does that allow Smith to move into the slot, move into the flanker position? Because like rather quietly, he's been that guy lining up at that position for the Eagles, at least in 22 especially, and a little bit in 23 as well. Or do they take a guy on, day 2 or day 3 of the draft? I think they need a third receiver here. So, which again, just more volatility. So he's an interesting player to discuss, but I'm glad, because I respect your opinion on wide receivers, that you're kind of the same kind of wavelength with me here, which is very, very good player and very much deserving of this contract.